I think a building or any structure does not, stand by itself. It responds to the surrounding environment. How it is built also responds to the surrounding environment, because it is not built divested of nature. If you look at animals, how do they build? They just pick up things which are almost waste. They never take things which are, in a way precious or used by somebody else. You look at birds, there are different birds that are built out with pellets made out of mud. They make
Yeah.
laddus. There are birds that make use twigs to make a nest. So if you see, all these resources come from a shared, space,
Right.
and they know that whatever they take, you can only take in a limited way, you know. And finally, after the creature uses it, sometimes these structures are also shared. Like a rufous woodpecker will share the nest built by a fire ant, pagoda ant. So you see this sharing of resources. Second is, after at the end of its life, when the structure is useless for that creature, it becomes a home for another creature, or it goes back to nature. Because you're using natural, items, then it just becomes natural for it to become part of nature at the
Right.
end of its life. Today we are not seeing that,
Right.
and a lot of our buildings are built out of material which is unsustainable. There's a huge carbon footprint. We are also building too much.
Talula, thank you for hosting me at your own house that you are building. It's something that you kind of believe in. In times where cities are expanding, we see skyscrapers are growing higher. Many architectures more leaning towards concrete and glass, and your philosophies are more around sustainability, and you're trying to get back to soil, tradition, and innovation between the soil and tradition. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you in Goa. It's a place that is very close to my heart, and I would love to hear as to how you are moving things forward. Yeah.
Thank you. I look forward to our conversation.
Yes. So when you say Goa, many people think of this as a place for vacation. That's the first impression that most people get. What does Goa mean to you?
Goa is home. And when I say home, I mean, the unique ecosystems that we have, because I spent a lot of my growing years in the city, in the, what you call peri-urban parts of the city, which has fields, the unique cousins, and also the mangroves in my ancestral area. So whenever I go to a location which has mangroves and salt water and salinity and that salty air, I feel that is home for me.
That's so. And how does that reflect in all the work that you do, or is there inspiration for you?
I think I spent a lot of my time, with my father, who was really like a wild person, spending a lot of his time outdoors with the community and in nature. And I think that subconsciously had a very big impact on me. So when I started, working and, even practicing architecture, somehow that remained very central to my thinking and my sensitivity.
And what role does heritage play in the work that you do?
I think heritage to me is not like a building, but it is all encompassing. For me, heritage is my roots, it is the culture, it is the people. And in terms of architecture, it is the homes that my ancestors built. And when I say home, I don't mean just a structure, but also in terms of large community based structures, like the cousins that we have, which was, a unique piece of architecture, engineering marvel that was built by the community. So, that according to me is heritage.
What is community-based architecture?
Um, it is something that, if you look at the world today, everybody is very focused on me, mine, and everybody is centric. The individual is very centric today in terms of, living a life which has a focus on material living, you know. Today, life is all about money in a way. But if you look at traditional communities and how they lived life and how they came together, it is very special. Nature was looked at, something that we were accountable to. So you could not take things, just for your need. You had to think twice about using any aspect of or any item in your surrounding environment. And communities lived in a way where there was no, labor, and you had to hire a labor. Everybody came together to build things, to make things, even to cook. And today, if you see, the world is changing. Everybody is only thinking about, what I can take from the environment. And there is this intergenerational consumption and colonization. So everybody is just taking more than that is required. So I feel that, there are a lot of lessons in the way our traditional practices to, let's say, build a house. I wouldn't look at it as something that I'm doing for myself, but a space that the community can use, and therefore the community should be involved in, building it together.
Right. What drew you to architecture?
I was, when I was growing up, I had a neighbor who was already doing architecture, and he used to tell me about, his experience in the college. They were very creative. He would share with me the college, little periodicals which were all hand drawn. So one was, I was very curious and interested in the creative part of it. And then finally, when I got to visit the college when I was in my 10th, 11th, 12th, I really felt like a pull. And I felt that that was the only thing I would do, and I would not do anything else. So, and I was also fascinated with the architecture I saw in nature. So I think that was the big draw for me.
So you spoke about community, you spoke about nature. So you also speak a lot about ecosystem. So how do you, what does that mean to you in your architecture? What is ecosystem, community, everything put together?
I think a building or any structure does not, stand by itself. It responds to the surrounding environment. How it is built also responds to the surrounding environment, because it is not built divested of nature. If you look at animals, how do they build? They just pick up things which are almost waste. They never take things which are, in a way precious or used by somebody else. I don't know how to explain this, but you look at birds. There are different birds that are built out with pellets made out of mud. They make laddus. There are birds that make use twigs to make a nest. So if you see, all these resources come from a shared, space.
Right.
And they know that whatever they take, you can only take in a limited way, you know. And finally, after the creature uses it, sometimes these structures are also shared. Like a rufous woodpecker will share the nest built by a fire ant, pagoda ant. So you see this sharing of resources. Second is, after at the end of its life, when the structure is useless for that creature, it becomes a home for another creature, or it goes back to nature. Because you're using natural, items, then it just becomes natural for it to become part of nature at the end of its life. Today we are not seeing that,
Right.
and a lot of our buildings are built out of material which is unsustainable. There's a huge carbon footprint. We are also building too much.
Right. Right. Because the vision or the image of perceived beauty and perfection has changed from a home to some of maybe a masterpiece that everybody wants to create.
Also, like you said, as especially I'm saying from the perspective of Goa, you see a lot of people coming as tourists, and now those same tourists are building homes, and therefore all the people who are migrating and building homes are building homes with a swimming pool because they're seeing it from the perception of a tourist, and it is causing a lot of damage to the ecosystems in Goa because of that.
Right. That actually was my next thinking. So, because how do you focus a lot on natural materials? Um, how can we use that consistently? Yeah, and being environmentally conscious and be aesthetically savvy. How do you kind of marry that?
I think one is if you look at all natural items, there is a certain emotion it evokes in us. Like I've had people coming, I've had interns and students. We all go to different sites on a site visit. And when buildings are being constructed in a very industrial way, so most of the cement concrete buildings are made like that, where you have machines, you'll have a mixer, and you'll have a vibrator, you'll have cutting machines. All those industrial systems and the noise it creates makes it very, um, I don't know, it's not attuned to the human psyche in a way. And if there is, then you look at the natural way of building, you're using your hand. It's a very sensory experience. None of the materials are harmful for you, like cement or plastic or any of those synthetic materials. So somehow it evokes also a very nice feeling in people when you're building naturally because of the materials and the textural quality and everything else. So I think it is important for people, to engage into systems which come naturally to us.
Right, right. And how can we if you look at a city like a Mumbai, how do you get this in context with urbanization at scale like that?
I've been working and speaking at various forums about cities and city planning. I've also spent a lot of time in city, renewal projects and urban interventions. And I feel there are two things, that we need to be conscious of. One is to look at whether the city can generate its own, material. Because if you look at all of us, like I'm also a migrant to the city, and if you look at this disparity between villages or rural areas and urban areas, rural areas are almost self sufficient in terms of their needs, in terms of resource management and materials that they need to build. Whereas cities are not, and cities are taking everything right from their fresh air to water and everything from peripheral areas. But today there is a lot of potential if you look at debris and waste material. Like plastic can be built and made into blocks and used in buildings that are for public use. You can use debris, construction debris in building material, I mean, building buildings. You can also look at technology which is allows you to build high rise. So you use structural steel, you use RCC, but in an intelligent way where the skins of the building are breathing skins, where you use, blocks made out of mud and everything, which are good for the users, and you don't have to then depend on expensive technology to keep the buildings comfortable in a city.
So does that escalate the cost tremendously, or
Not really. If you're looking at using debris and using materials like in the, we have buildings which are more than 100 years old, which used a steel which is called structural steel. I'm not talking about the tall steel bars which are encased into RCC, but I'm talking about raw steel. So we have in the United States, one of the most landmark buildings made out of steel. We also have, if you see our railway lines, we have the I sections. We also have old traditional floors in India called jack arches, which are more than 100 years old, which use that kind of steel. And of course, the infill is brick. So can we use material very intelligently? I think today we are not, and that is what is causing so many problems. We have cement concrete buildings which are more than 100 years old, which have lasted, which were designed so well that they don't need air conditioning. But if you look at our technology, modern technology, and using modern materials, I think somewhere we are failing because those buildings are built so poorly that they have a very short life, and therefore there's a need to, rebuild our cities every 50 years.
Right, right, right. So it's also a case of greed, uh, because more consumption, more money being rotated. So we are actually fighting capitalism in a way when it comes to this. Correct? Okay. So do you hear this? Do you hear this voice that you carry increasing?
Today, I think if you look at formal education, in all sectors, there is a disconnect that all of us are studying from a book which is limited, and there is less focus given on practical training, um, doing things naturally and in situ. So, because of this disconnect, we are finding that a lot of people, like I work with a lot of youngsters, they are comfortable to work in an office in a very corporate kind of setup, but they are very scared to work in a setup where they are accountable, or they have to use their intelligence in a way where it is directly sort of connected to building in a way. So I think there needs to be a shift. People don't know how to make that shift. But today with the NEP, a lot of things are changing. Students are now encouraged, institutions are now encouraged to start looking at practical ways of learning or vocational training right from the fifth grade. So I think that is one. Second is, in a place like Goa, there is a lot of awareness amongst the local community. So local people are very aware of the, let's say, destruction of land, destruction of our ecosystems, destruction of heritage, this, tussle between, building, conversion of land to conserving. And I think that is making a difference because we have people speaking up. There are a lot of PILs in both directions. One is where people are trying to raise a voice and protect lands which are now getting converted. There's a lot of people trying to preserve natural water bodies like lakes in a way to, make sure that we keep our water security.
Nice.
And there are also a large number of young architects and planners and others who are engaged in creating awareness about the problems that will rise with, conversion of land, conversion of pristine lands for construction.
Right, right. You've written an article which says, "Will nature send an invoice to booming Goa?" And it speaks about accountability. So, what does climate accountability look like uh, to architects and policymakers?
I think, like I said earlier, we have to be accountable for every bit of material that we are using for construction to build for people. The first important part is intelligent design. If we are only building box-like designs, that means we are not doing justice, to the creativity and knowledge that we have.
Right.
And therefore, we need to understand that how can we look at circularity? Is there circularity in the first place? How can we look at circularity in a way where we are accountable to the materials that we use, and at the end of its life that same material can be used or reused in another form. If you look at, there is all this knowledge is already there. Somewhere in the attempt of learning, we have lost. So we need to unlearn all those methods that we have learned in formal education to go back to the way indigenous communities built, designed. So I'm working with a lot of youngsters to make them understand the value in material, which is called also, dumped material, waste material. And what is happening is because of that kind of understanding, many students, young architects do not know. And it is becoming a norm. Like everywhere you go, suppose you have a hillside, the designer thinks that it is best to level the land and build on it. But we have had amazing examples of traditional architecture which conserves hill slopes, which conserves, old trees. So there needs to be a revival or a reconnection with traditional knowledge. And only then I think can we become accountable to the way we design and the way we practice architecture.
So when somebody who's not thinking on these lines, what are the common myths that they have about building sustainably?
Many things. So when I meet people, they say, "Oh, if you build a mud house or a natural home, the walls will have to be very thick, right? So we will lose space." So that's a myth because you don't really. I mean, you have space on your land, and you know that if you build a little thicker walls, it will give you amazing insulation, wherein which you won't have to depend on mechanical systems to keep your building cool.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing that people come up with is, will mud houses, disintegrate in heavy rains?
Yeah.
But we have houses which are 300, 400 years old in Goa, built with mud, built with laterite stone, where the mortar was mud mortar.
Right.
Now they have not disintegrated because there was a way in which they were, built with a lime plaster and everything. And if we understand that, I think that loss of traditional knowledge of building with natural material has caused a lot of these anxieties, and people are worried whether these homes will last. We are now working on certain technology wherein which you can add stabilizers like lime, which is very very effective. And in some cases cement is used as a placebo because when you say there is a little bit of cement, then people feel
Comfortable.
comfortable. And we've done these a lot of tests to look at the strength of the material and also to look at its versatility when we build in conditions where there is flooding, where there is rainfall.
Yeah. In fact, I am sitting in this place which you're building, and I can pretty certainly say it is so pleasant while it is sunny outside.
It's very hot. If you
Yeah.
actually step out, you'll feel
Yeah.
really uncomfortable.
Yeah. So let's also talk about Goa a bit and tourism. I'm very curious to understand your thought on sustainable tourism, and is it driven by tourists or is it driven by policymakers and or the governing
I think
officials?
it's both, and I think we are forgetting one part, which is local community. So we have fantastic examples. I've gone to, traveled a lot of places across the world with a focus on my social work. And let's look at, places in India. There's Andamans, which has, fantastic examples of responsible tourism. I've been to the Galapagos Islands where the local community, dictates everything, right from how the waste is upcycled and reused. I'm talking about the non-biodegradable waste. So I think first is tourism, which will benefit the local community, has to be priority. And tourism that can benefit the local ecosystems and the environment. Goa, nobody knows. Every tourist that comes to Goa will land up at the railway station or the airport and will see huge number of hoardings which promote, which will entice them to go to casinos and or to build a second home. So these are the two big advertisements that we see. Nowhere are we saying that, we have the Western Ghats in Goa. We have, which is one of the top biodiversity hotspots across the world. Nobody is saying that we have the unique Cousins in Goa, which is a flood management system built nearly 5,000 years ago. Have you heard about petroglyphs in Goa, which are 20,000 years old? I'm sure these are not known because they are not promoted. So there is, that means, a gap. And tourism today is all about money and enjoyment.
Yeah.
You know, this false kind of enjoyment, which is consumeristic. It doesn't leave you satisfied and happy, you know, in a way. And it is also becoming a problem to the local communities, because you look at the generation of plastic waste, you know, all across Goa. In the most pristine spots, we find not only microplastic but nanoplastic now, in water, in soil, in everything that we consume. And this requires a policy change. The government is doing its bit, but it is not enough. Because finally, if you know, the state can do something which can preserve environment and preserve the rights of the local community, you know, it will have benefits to all if it does that.
So it is. So do you think there is also a disbalance in terms of disbalance caused due to the economic aspiration that people have here, and hence they become a bit indifferent to the environmental degradation that is happening? Is that, do you think that could be a reason?
I think it is just, you know, taking ownership and understanding what Goa has to offer. If you look at when tourism started in Goa, you know, we had the hippies coming. And what was popular at that time was they were searching for peace. And, you know, everybody was settling in Goan villages where the life was very simple. Now, that has not changed, you know, but in terms of policy and, you know, the focus of tourism has changed to make it more consumeristic. Goa is seen as a commodity, you know, where people just want to come, enjoy, and go back. But there's no sense of giving back. If you we do
Right.
meet people where they say that we have a lot of local responsible tourism enterprises where they're taking people, let's say, for a dolphin tour. The larger, you know, number of dolphin tour operators will just take, you know, like, will take a lot of people in a small boat. They will play blaring music, and all the boats will rush to the point where the dolphins are sighted. Now, that's not the way,
Yeah.
you know. So I think from the perspective of policy and the government, you know, norms, we have to put in place strictures where and learning from best practices across India, where you can take people to natural habitats, but there has to be a decorum. It has to be also priced high, so that, you know, we don't have people, you know, misbehaving and not respecting, you know,
Yeah.
nature and environment. And mind you, our ministers and also the high-end tourists and other tourists who come to India or Goa have also gone to other places across the world where they do follow, you know, strictures and norms in other countries. But somehow, you know, there's no monitoring, I would say, in Goa. Where is the policing and monitoring? You know, Goa is known now for crime more than anything else. So, and in terms of, if you're talking about architecture and building and everything, a lot needs to change. I feel that the government needs to have a will and ownership that, you know, Goa is very pristine and beautiful, and there is a certain part that, you know, come what way, we need to preserve. Because, you know, if we are going to lose Goa's beauty, our coastal areas, our wetlands, and everything, what then will the tourists come for? And therefore, then you will need all the other, you know, false sort of attractions in a way to get tourists to come and enjoy, right?
Right. Right. So coming to architecture, it has been a male dominated dominated space. So as a woman, how has your approach been towards architecture? Is it any different than your male counterparts?
I think there is a difference. Actually, when I first started, you know, I did not know that there was another way. I just thought that because I was already, when I got trained with an architect in Goa who worked very closely with Laurie Baker. So I learned the method of design and build. And designing is, of course, even today is very common, because most architects design and you sit in an office and you feel really nice. But building is something that not many women or even today men are a part of. I mean, you have a
Right.
contractor who is a male, but generally women don't get into that space, and even architects don't get into that space. But since I had learned this, I felt that that was the only way. I did not know that there was another way. So when I started practicing, I was building, and all my clients were lay people, they were farmers. So I was building like really low cost houses in 1 lakh, 2 lakh, and helping them to build. And when I first started building, at that time about 28 years ago, even building teams were not male centric. They were, families, they were husband and wife teams. There were a lot of women on construction sites. So it seemed like a very familiar environment. It seemed like a very empathetic environment. Today that is changing, but I think it is important that, once you understand that, these are the ways of building sensitively, then it becomes very easy. I would have a lot of people asking me, तुम्हारे घर में कोई आदमी नहीं है जो ये काम कर सकता है? When I would go on site, they would say, why are you not wearing any earrings? Like, because they would look at me as a woman or a typical woman, and not somebody who can actually build and construct and handle labor and, workers. So at one side, there was this kind of, unfriendly and difficult environment. But I was so passionate that I would not focus on those things.
Right.
And I did, like I said, I did not know that there was any other way. For me, this was the only way to do it. And I drew a lot of satisfaction from, working very closely with the building construction team. I learned a lot of things from my first mason that I did not learn in formal education.
Right, right. So now for the newer architect, and especially the ones who are trying to work in the intersection of design and climate change, what would your suggestions to them be?
So one is, we've recently started a foundation called the Tambadi Mati Foundation, which is focused on the region of the Konkan. And the idea and the objective is to look at skill building, because there is a gap. We don't have, like, a lot of people come and say, oh, a mud house is possible or a natural home is possible. Oh, this is possible and that is possible. And they say that we did not know, because in the market, it is only contractors who can build with RCC. Even contractors today who want to learn about mud building, they'll say, ma'am, लेकिन अगर RCC का काम है मुझे देना. Because there is a lot of profits for the contractor in building an RCC structure. So understanding that there is a gap, we are now doing trainings for artisans. We are also very open and supportive to peer-to-peer learning. So we are taking our trained masons to sites where, the mason needs training or needs to know more about natural building. And we are encouraging, like, all the students. I have students who are reaching out to me now who want to gain experience in sustainability, natural building, construction. So we are creating those spaces where they can come and learn. It's hard work because, they are not used to that environment where there is no office work at all. You have to be on site. You have to go every day on site. You have to learn it the hard way. You have to work with the mason. Because I think for me also, that was my foundation,
Right.
When I learned from my mason, I used to, do masonry, dress stones, learn mixing. And that became the, the basis on which my practice sort of was built on.
Right.
After that.
Right, right. So if I were to ask you a question, so everything comes down to per square feet when most people are assessing. So what is a per square feet rough cost for somebody to build their own house?
Today, if you look at costs, they are skyrocketing. Any standard building or a structure will cost you about 25,000 per square meter, which is 2,500 per square feet.
Right.
Now it is becoming unaffordable for a common person to, build. And everywhere you go, it is cement concrete. People are stuck with a technology which, in the first 2 years looks amazing. You don't know how it has been built because everything is slapped with a plaster. And in 2 years, then you begin to see, something is cracking, something is leaking. It becomes a liability and a burden. So I have been, because I've been, doing a lot of work in looking at sustainability, affordability. I'm able to help people build homes or structures in a range of half the construction cost today,
Oh,
which is about 10,000, 12,000 a square meter, to, of course, an upper limit, because some people do prefer using wood and tiles, like stone tiles, which are very expensive. We are still trying to, bring in a lot of sensitivity from the perspective of resources management. For the last 10 years, I'm not using sand at all, which is really expensive, and there's a lot of illegal sand mining. Stone is now becoming a problem because all the stone is got from outside Goa, and it is very, very expensive. So mud, therefore, the local mud offers that amazing opportunity to build affordably. And we are able to, if you get your soil from the
from
land
the land itself.
itself,
Yeah.
and even from waste, then, half the cost is saved.
Right. It's been a wonderful conversation, Talula. So, what would be your, final, closing thoughts on anyone who wants to build for the planet and not just for profit?
I think you're on the right track if you are sensitive and concerned about the environment and you want to do something for the planet. And I think just draw inspiration from nature, because if you look at all things in nature, they will not take selfishly, and whatever they take, there's also this giving back.
Nice.
So we need to change our perspective from looking at resource, even human poop, as a resource, which we are doing in our projects, and not to be fearful, to be fearless, because the world is out there, and we don't have to consume it, but we have to participate it in a way where we can give back. And there is no greater joy when we work like that, when we give back, because what does a human really need? If we limit our wants, I think there's only more joy to be experienced.
Wonderful. Wishing you more success and
Thank you.
many more like you who will contribute to the planet positively.
Thank you.